About half of my seeds ended up rotting that season, which was not a fun experience, and I ended up having to plant out all of those seeds from scratch, which I'm sure you don't want to do. Hey, and welcome back to Mini Urban Farm, a channel about urban gardening and homesteading in the suburbs. Today we are talking about planting in the rain. If you should plant in the rain, if you should plant on cloudy days, if it's better to plant on sunny days, all of that. Now, this is a question that I know I get asked a lot from my friends who are gardeners, and it's a question that I've had several times, right? It's not like a one-size-fits-all. I used to ask myself this question back when I first started gardening, and as I've evolved through the years from only planting transplants to now starting my own seeds, I've asked myself that same question. So first, let me tell you why I decided to make a video on this. I have had several experiences where I transplant in the rain, I start seeds in the rain, or I start seeds on cloudy days or sunny days, and generally everything works out pretty well, but there are certain circumstances where you really shouldn't be starting seeds or transplanting, and I'm going to tell you exactly why. I had a garden a while back, this was several years ago now, and I would only really, at that time, transplant seeds, right? I didn't start my own seeds. I would go buy at the nursery, I'd go buy seed starts and take them into the garden and transplant them in. So what ended up happening was I took all those seedlings, right? Super excited, took all those seedlings and I planted them in on a very sunny day. And then it decided that the weather was just gonna have a 180-degree turn, and it poured rain for about 3 hours after I transplanted. So of course I'm inside completely panicked because I had just planted out all of my seedlings a couple hours, maybe the day before, something like that. And it was just full on thunderstorm, like 3 hours worth of rain. I thought that everything was going to be dead and I would have to plant out everything from scratch. Now that is the opposite of what happened. After the rain had passed, I was able to see outside. It was literally that bad that I could not see outside into the garden from the living room. So just to give you an idea about the amount of rain. Now I went outside and everything had like a different color green. Everything that had planted out earlier or the day before or whenever it was vibrant green. It looked like it had grown several inches immediately. I have no idea how that was possible, but it just was so crazy, right? Like everything just popped up and grew because I had planted right before the rain. Okay, perfect. So I thought. Fast forward several years, I kept doing that. You know, whenever there was about to be a big rainstorm, I would plant out right before and that would be perfect. Now, last season, I started seeds from scratch. For about maybe the third or fourth season now, I've been starting seeds from scratch. And when I say from scratch, I just mean from seed, not having to buy them at the local nursery. I'll just buy the seed packets. And so I decided I was going to plant out all of my seeds, right? And right before it rained, because that was the best moment to do it, right? According to all of my experience in the past. Now, I planted out bean seeds, and I planted out like 100 or more bean seeds last season in this same garden behind me. If you watch any of my other videos, you saw that we had tons of beans last season. So I planted out my bean seeds. I planted them out staggered, right? So one day I planted them out and those green bean seeds grew fine. They did fine, no worries. And then because they were doing so well, I planted out another set of Cherokee wax beans. Now I love Cherokee wax beans and I planted out a whole bunch of these. So then fast forward about a week, I was wondering why these bean seeds were not germinating, right? Like if you plant bean seeds at all, you know that they sprout pretty fast, right? Within a couple days, you have like a good sized little seedling. But you don't want to transplant them because if you're planting out, 40 or 50 bean seeds, which is probably about half the amount that I plant out, you don't want to have to transplant every single one of those into the garden. So I always start them from seed. Now those seeds were not germinating. So after about a week and a half, I went back and I started kind of like digging up the little hole just to see, what was taking them so long, like what happened. And a lot of them, I couldn't even find them. And the ones that I were able to find in the soil, it's not like they were buried too deep, they were buried properly. But the ones that I did find were completely turned to mush. They had rotted. And the reason for this rot, after doing some research, is that the ground was already wet. Or when I say the ground, I mean the soil in the raised boxes here. But the soil was already soaking wet because it had rained for several days before that. And it had rained the day I planted them out and the day after I planted them out. And it had just continued raining. And so those seeds actually never got the chance to germinate because they just rotted in the ground, which left me wondering, if I had done it before with the transplants, but now these seeds are not germinating properly, like what's the difference? So today let's break it down and talk about the differences between transplanting transplants, seeds into the garden that you've already started and are in containers, versus planting out seeds directly into the raised beds or in ground or wherever you're planting them out. And there's the difference. Now, this video is about planting in the rain, and the reason I decided to make this video today is because it has been raining all morning long. Yesterday it was supposed to rain and it didn't rain, and I have been waiting, right? All of my, I don't know if you can see, but there's a bunch of little things growing in the boxes. All of my transplants have been in since before we went on vacation. And then I decided that I was going to wait until after we came back from our trip to sow my seeds. Now, I definitely thought I was going to be able to do that last week. That did not happen because it decided it was just going to pour rain, and based on the information I tell you, I decided to wait. And this week, the same thing happened where the forecast is just rain nonstop, and I've had to actually turn off my irrigation system for the majority of this week so far. So I decided this week would not be a good week to plant either, to direct sow my seeds. But I will be direct sowing this weekend because the forecast is supposed to be sunny, and very slight chance of rain, which, yeah, you want some rain sometimes, but without rain, you can control the amount of water that they get with the irrigation system by manually watering and all of that. So that's my preference. I'm gonna wait until there's no rain forecasted so that I can go ahead and plant my seeds in the ground and not have to worry about the level of water in the raised beds or controlling the water. I will have complete control over when they're being watered. So now let's break it down for real. The difference between transplanting seedlings versus planting seeds in ground. Let's start with transplants. Now, transplants are great to plant out on cloudy days, even when there's going to be a little bit of rain. You don't ever want to plant in the middle of a thunderstorm, right? You don't want to plant when it's going to be, 6 inches of rain in the next 3 hours. Don't do that for anything. Don't plant anything, seeds, transplants, anything like that. But for transplants, it's great to plant out on a cloudy day. And here's why. When you're transplanting seedlings into the garden, they suffer from what's known as transplant shock, right? Which is where they're just not able to absorb a lot of water because they're just in shock from being in a new environment. Their roots start to branch out and they're just kind of getting situated, if you will. On top of that, if you've planted out and it's really, really sunny outside, the water is going to be evaporating in ground, in the raised boxes, wherever it is. The water level it evaporates. So when the water evaporates and your plants are not getting that water because of the transplant shock, they're not absorbing any water, then they tend to wilt and die, and that's when you get transplants that you planted out and they kind of look like, they're wilting all of a sudden, they're shriveling up, they're toppling over, that kind of thing. So when it's going to be scorching hot outside, you never want to transplant out your seedlings because you want them to get the best chance at absorbing all the water and just getting situated without having to worry about the sun beating down on them. So for transplants, definitely transplants on a cloudy day. Of course, stick to cloudy days, not pouring rain days, because you don't want your plant roots to rot. Root rot is a very real thing. You'll notice in your little cups, right? If you take them and transplant them, root rot signs are, the roots turning like a brown mucky color. The water is like still sitting in that container. You want proper drainage. So you never want to plant out when it's pouring rain outside, when you're gonna have tons of rain. Don't do that. Just stick to cloudy days for transplants and you should be fine. And I actually have a few transplants that are going to be going in the garden today because it has stopped raining. It is still quite cloudy. It's starting to warm up a little bit, but it's not like full sun out right now, and it's not projected to be full sun throughout the entire day today. So I will be planting out some thyme seedlings that I have. I've propagated, if you watched one of my previous videos about propagating, I propagated a whole bunch of thyme cuttings, and so I'm going to take a few of those and put them back in my garden bed back there that has zucchini growing in it, and the area around the zucchini is actually completely bare and it's getting a lot of weeds, so I'm going to plant out some of those around it just so that it kind of provides a little bit of a ground cover and prevents the bed from drying out so much. Alright, so now let's talk about starting seeds on rainy days. Now, I told you that story about how on that rainy day, or soon to be rainy day, I planted on my seeds and they rotted. Now, I was so intrigued by that I planted out another set of beans, and I decided to I was so fascinated by that because that had never happened to me. So I decided to do an experiment in which I took bean seeds, right? And a lot of bean seeds on the back of the packet, they'll say to soak overnight, right? To promote germination and make sure that they get the water that they need. So I had never done that before with bean seeds. I decided to pre-soak them, and then another set of bean seeds, the same exact type of seeds, I didn't pre-soak them. All right, I planted them both out in exactly the same conditions, right? The soil was mostly dry, a little bit wet. I had wet the soil ahead of time, but it wasn't like pouring rain or anything, so the soil was not dripping wet. And both of those seeds got planted on the exact same day, the exact same time. Now, only one of those, I think it was like 10 seeds of each category that I planted out, only one of the ones that had been pre-soaked ended up germinating. The rest of them were completely mush when I dug them up a week later. The other ones, on the other hand, all of them germinated, right? That is fascinating. So you really want to make sure that you have the proper conditions, the proper amount of water in the soil. And of course, when it rains, and it is going to be raining for a long period of time, the seeds tend to rot much faster than if you're controlling that water. Another thing to consider when planting out your seeds when it is going to rain is that if it is going to be a very, very harsh rain, not only will your seeds have more of a likelihood of rotting, but harsh raindrops can actually displace your seeds. And there has been more than one instance that I find different seeds in different boxes where I did not plant them at all. And it was because there is just rain and wind, and those little seedlings, especially if they're only covered by, you know, a 1/4 inch or an 1/8 of an inch of soil, they move, right? The wind can pick them up and put them in different boxes. Last season, we had a lot of carrot seeds growing through the rocks on the floor, right? This rock behind me, all this white stuff is rock. And I had carrots growing through, and mustard greens and kale, and I was just wondering where that came from, because it's not like I was just throwing seeds up in the air and watching them fall down. So the rain and the wind had picked them up and displaced them because they are tiny little seeds. You don't want that to happen, right? You want to be able to tell where you planted your vegetables, where you planted your seedlings out. So that's just another consideration. You know, make sure that it is not going to be pouring rain before you plant your seeds or your seedlings. Okay, so to recap, seeds definitely plant out on hot, warm, sunny days where the soil temperatures are warm and you're able to control the amount of rain because it is not a thunderstorm outside. You're not going to have your seeds rotting before they even get to germinate. Now, transplants, on the other hand, plant them out on cloudy days where it's not going to lead to tons of evaporation in the soil, and they will have less transplant shock overall. I hope this video was helpful and answered a lot of questions, because I know that it was helpful for me to learn this information when I was just getting started in gardening, and as I advanced through the different levels of beginner gardener, intermediate gardener, and one day hopefully advanced gardener, we'll see. But thanks so much for watching. I hope this video was very helpful to you. If it was, please like and subscribe for more information on gardening, urban gardening, homesteading, chickens, all of that good stuff. I will see you in the next one.